You know what I realized, Caroline? You were always supposed to be temporary. Dennis didn't even look up from his phone when he said it. We were sitting in our kitchen, I thought then, foolishly, and he was scrolling through something, half smiling at the screen. It was the casual delivery that made it so much worse. Like he was commenting on the weather. What? I said, though I'd heard him perfectly. Temporary. He glanced up, almost friendly. Just something I was thinking about. How nothing's really permanent, you know? Then he went back to his phone, leaving me sitting there with my coffee going cold in my hands. This was 3 months before I found the folder. Before I understood what he meant. Before I learned that I had spent 30 years married to a man who'd been married to someone else the entire time. But to understand how I got there, how I spent 3 decades as legally invisible as a ghost, I need to go back to the beginning. I met Dennis when I was 32. Late bloomer, my mother called it, though she meant it as criticism. I'd been focused on my nursing career, on building something of my own. Dennis was 41, confident, established. He worked in insurance risk assessment, he'd say with that slight smile like it was amusing. He took me to nice restaurants, never made me feel silly for not knowing which fork to use. When he proposed after 8 months, it felt like finally someone saw me as worth keeping. We got married at City Hall. Small ceremony. His explanation made sense at the time. He'd been through an expensive wedding before, and it had ended badly. Why tempt fate with a big production? I thought it was mature, practical. My mother was disappointed about the lack of a proper wedding, but then my mother had made disappointment her primary form of communication. At least Dennis wanted me enough to make it legal, I thought. Legal. That word would come back to haunt me. The first decade was fine. Not passionate, but stable. Dennis worked long hours. I worked nights at the hospital, 3 12-hour shifts a week. We had a rhythm. He handled all the finances. You work hard enough, he'd say. Let me take care of the paperwork. It seemed generous then. He put my paychecks into our account, paid the bills, managed the investments. He never questioned it. Why would I? This was my husband. We bought a house in year 5. Well, he bought a house. My name didn't go on the deed because my credit wasn't as strong, he explained. We'd add me later. Later never came, but there was always a reason. Timing, interest rates, refinancing complications. I trusted him. God, did I trust him? Year 12, I wanted a baby. Dennis said we should wait until we were more financially stable. Year 15, he said he was too old to start over with diapers. Year 18, he stopped asking. By then, I'd turned my maternal energy toward my nieces and nephews, my friends' kids, the young nurses I mentored at work. I told myself it was enough. Some women don't get to be mothers. I could be other things. I was other things. When I hit 55 and started talking about retirement, Dennis got strange. Tense. He'd always been controlled that insurance adjuster precision, but this was different. He started working later, taking weekend trips for conferences. He became obsessed with his phone, angling it away when I walked by. Classic affair behavior, I thought. I even laughed about it with my friend Joyce one morning after a shift. 30 years in, and he's finally getting predictable, I said, stirring my coffee at the diner where we always debriefed after night shifts. Next, he'll buy a red sports car and start wearing cologne. Joyce raised an eyebrow. You're taking this very calmly. At our age? Joyce, if Dennis wants to have some crisis, let him. I'm too tired to care about his midlife drama. I've been changing bedpans for 12 hours. His little secrets can wait. I didn't know then how much I'd wish it had just been an affair. The folder appeared 3 months after that temporary comment. I wasn't snooping, that's the irony. I was looking for our insurance paperwork because my car had been hit in a parking lot. Dennis kept everything filed in his home office, organized with that maddening precision of his. I knew exactly where the auto insurance would be. 3rd drawer, manila folder labeled vehicle coverage. Except when I opened that drawer, there was a different folder on top. Unmarked. Unusual for Dennis, who labeled everything. I almost pushed it aside. Almost. but something made me open it. Inside, a marriage certificate. Dennis Franklin Morrison married to Patricia Ann Delacroix. Date: Le 14 juin 1981. I stared at it for a long moment, my brain trying to make it make sense. Some paperwork from his first marriage, obviously, except I knew his first wife's name, Carolyn. He'd mentioned her a handful of times over the years. Said she'd remarried, moved to Oregon. This wasn't her. I flipped through the folder. There was a deed to a house in a town 40 miles north. Patricia Morrison, owner, utility bills in her name at that address, bank statements showing monthly deposits from an account I didn't recognize. Recent ones from this year, and then, stapled together in a neat bundle, life insurance policies, all on me. Caroline Jean Thompson, never legally Morrison, I would soon learn. 5 different policies from 5 different companies. The oldest from 10 years ago, $250,000. Then $350,000. Then $500,000. The most recent, dated 4 months ago, $750,000. The progression was methodical. The kind of thing someone would do if they were building towards something. Underneath the policies, printed emails, queries about accidental death clauses, questions about payout timelines, and then, buried at the bottom, printouts from websites, staging accidents, investigation red flags, how life insurance companies investigate claims, accidental false statistics by age group. My hands started shaking. I sat down right there on the floor of his office, that folder spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. 30 years. 30 years I lived with this man, slept beside him, nursed him through 2 surgeries, believed I was building a life, a partnership, a future. I'd been building nothing. I'd been an investment property he was waiting to liquidate. The sound of the garage door opening sent me scrambling. I shoved everything back into the folder exactly as I'd found it, closed the drawer, and walked calmly to the kitchen. My nursing training kicked in. In a crisis, your hands know what to do even when your brain has short-circuited. I started chopping val tables for dinner. Normal. Everything normal. Dennis came in, kissed my cheek, he always did that, the small affections that made it all feel real, and asked about my day. Fine, I said, my voice steady. Quite day. How was work? The usual. He loosened his tie. Risk assessment never changes. Same problems, different idiots making them. I watched him walk away and thought, you're the risk. You've always been the risk. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to him breathe, and planned. Not revenge, not yet. First, I needed to understand the full scope. How deep did this go? Who was Patricia? And most importantly, was I in immediate danger, or did I have time? The next morning, after Dennis left for work, I photographed every page in that folder with my phone. Then I started my research. Patricia Ann Morrison, née Delacroix, âge 71. Living in a modest house in Greendale, 40 miles north. And according to public records, still married to Dennis Franklin Morrison. Their marriage had never been dissolved, never even filed for separation, which meant my marriage certificate, the one we'd framed, the one hanging in our bedroom all these years, was worth less than the paper it was printed on. I wasn't Dennis's wife. Legally, I'd never been his wife. Every asset we'd accumulated, everything I thought was ours, the house, the cars, the retirement accounts, belonged solely to him. My paychecks for 30 years, deposited into accounts in his name. I'd been paying for my own eventual murder without even knowing it. The question was, what to do about it? I could confront Dennis. Satisfying, briefly, but stupid. If he was planning to kill me, tipping him off would only accelerate his timeline. I could go to the police. But with what? Suspicious web searches and life insurance policies weren't illegal. I think my husband might be planning to kill me, would get me a sympathetic nod and a brochure about domestic violence resources. Nothing actionable. I could run, but where? I had no money of my own, Dennis had seen to that. And running from a man who assessed risk for a living seemed foolish. He'd find me, so I did what any 30-year nursing veteran would do. I stayed calm, gathered information, and planned for the worst. First, I needed money. I started pulling small amounts of cash from the weekly grocery budget, hiding it in a tampon box in my closet, the one place I knew Dennis would never look. 20 here, 50 there. It added up slowly. Second, I documented everything. I photographed the folder again multiple times from different angles. I backed up the photos to a new email account Dennis didn't know about. I printed copies and stored them in a safe deposit box at a bank across town, paid for with cash, of course. Third, I did my own research. Not on how to stage accidents, on how to expose them. I learned about insurance fraud investigations, about bigamy laws, about what happens when a man's first wife is very much alive and very much still legally his wife. Fourth, I found Patricia. This was the part I dreaded most. Did she know about me? Was she complicit, or was she another victim? There was only one way to find out. I drove to Greendale on a Thursday afternoon when Dennis thought I was at a seminar. The house was small, tidy, with wheelchair ramps and grab bars visible through the front window. Medical equipment modifications. My nurse's eye clocked them automatically. I knocked. The woman who answered was in a wheelchair, frail, her hands shaking with what looked like early Parkinson's or MS. She looked at me with curious but kind eyes. "Can I help you, Mrs. Morrison? Patricia Morrison?" "Yes?" Cautious now. "My name is Caroline. I think I've been married to your husband for 30 years. She didn't scream, didn't slam the door. She just went very still, and then she said, "You'd better come in." Over tea that neither of us drank, we compared notes. Patricia had met Dennis in 1979, married him in 1981. By 1985, he'd taken over all her finances. To help, he said, because her MS made handling paperwork difficult. By 1990, he was spending more and more time traveling for work. By 1995, she barely saw him at all. "He sends money every month," she said. "Enough to cover my care." I thought it was guilt. I thought maybe he had another family somewhere. But I never had proof, and honestly, I needed the money too much to push. "Did you ever try to divorce him?" "Once. In 2003. He talked me out of it. Said we'd lose too much in lawyers' fees, that it was better to keep things as they were. I was too sick to fight." She looked at me with something like wonder. "You said 30 years? Almost 31. Does he know you're here?" "No." "Good." She reached out and gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Keep it that way." We became allies that afternoon. Two women united by the same man's decades of deception. Patricia couldn't travel, couldn't testify, couldn't fight, but she could provide documentation. Bank records she'd kept, letters Dennis had written, photographs with timestamps, proof that their marriage had never ended, proof that mine had never begun. Armed with this, I went to a lawyer. Not a local one, someone in the city, someone Dennis didn't know. I explained everything, showed them the evidence, asked what my options were. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Martinez, leaned back in her chair and whistled low. "This is a lot. I'm aware. You're legally not married, which means you have no claim to marital assets. Everything he has is his, including the house you live in and the bank accounts your paychecks went into. I know, but..." She tapped her pen against the desk. "Bigamy is a crime. Fraud is a crime. And if we can prove he was planning to kill you for insurance money, that's also a crime. That's attempted murder conspiracy." She smiled, sharp and predatory. "That's prison time. Significant prison time." "How dove proveit?" That's where it gets tricky. The research he did, the policies, it's suggestive but not conclusive. We need more. What if I could get him to talk? To admit it? Recording laws in this state require one-party consent. If you're part of the conversation, you can record it. I went home that night with a small digital recorder in my purse and a script in my head. It took 3 weeks to get what we needed. 3 weeks of playing the devoted wife, of swallowing my rage every time Dennis kissed my cheek or called me honey. 3 weeks of carefully steering conversations toward retirement, finances, the future. And then, one night over dinner, I asked the question that cracked him open. Dennis, what happens if one of us dies first? Do we have enough insurance? He looked up from his steak, something flickering in his eyes. Why do you ask? Janet at work, her husband died last month. Heart attack, completely unexpected. She's struggling because they didn't have enough coverage. I kept my voice light, concerned, wifely. I just want to make sure we're prepared. Dennis set down his fork and I watched him decide something. We're well covered. Very well covered, actually. Oh, good. I didn't know you'd bought additional policies. I've been building our portfolio for years. He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. You're worth quite a lot, Caroline. More than you know. The recorder caught everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I got more. Comments about how convenient it would be if certain things happened. Discussions about policy payout timelines. Even after a few glasses of wine one night, a chilling admission. You know what the perfect crime is, Caroline? Something that looks like an accident. Everyone believes in accidents. The stairs are dark. You lose your balance. Tragic, but understandable. I had enough. More than enough. The day I confronted Dennis was a Tuesday. Unremarkable, ordinary. I'd sent copies of everything to my lawyer, to Patricia, to 3 trusted friends with instructions. If anything happened to me, the packages would be opened. Dennis came home to find me sitting at the kitchen table with that folder spread in front of me. The marriage certificate, the policies, the printouts, everything. His face went through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, calculation, and finally, that controlled calm I'd learned to despise. Caroline, what's all this? Cut the act. I know everything about Patricia, about Carolyn, about the insurance policies and your little accidental death research. I know you were planning to kill me. That's insane. You're not thinking clearly. The trauma of whatever happened. I have recordings, Dennis. Conversations, plans, everything. Your confession to your golf buddy about how convenient my accidental death was. Patricia's testimony about the bigamy. Your first wife's suspicious car accident. I have everything. He sat down slowly. What do you want? I want you to understand something. For 30 years, I believed I was building a life with you. I worked 60-hour weeks at a hospital, dealing with death and suffering, and came home to a marriage that I thought was real. You stole that from me. You stole my time, my earning years, my chance at a real family. You can't give any of that back. Caroline, I'm not finished. You're going to experience what it feels like to have your life dismantled piece by piece. Starting now. Over the next 3 weeks, I executed my own careful plan. First, I filed for divorce, citing fraud and bigamy. Since we were never legally married, I couldn't claim assets through divorce, but the filing was public record. News spreads fast in a small community, especially when it involves insurance fraud. Second, I sent a carefully compiled package to Dennis's employer, evidence of the bigamy, the multiple life insurance policies, the suspicious death of his first wife. I included a note pointing out that a man who commits insurance fraud in his personal life might not be the best person to be assessing risk and fraud for a major insurance company. Dennis was fired within a week. Third, I sent copies of everything to the insurance companies he'd been planning to defraud. They launched their own investigations. Turns out, insurance companies don't appreciate being scammed. They pursued him with the same relentless efficiency he'd once used in his job. Fourth, and this was my favorite part, I introduced Patricia to a very good lawyer who specialized in elder law. Turns out, Dennis had been siphoning money from Patricia's accounts for years, money that should have been set aside for her care. The lawyer was very interested in that. So was the district attorney's office. I didn't testify at Dennis's criminal trial. I didn't need to. Patricia did, frail but clear-eyed, explaining the bigamy and the financial abuse. Dennis's golf buddy, granted immunity, testified about the confession. The evidence spoke for itself. Dennis Franklin Morrison was convicted of fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. The prosecutor couldn't prove he'd killed his first wife. Too much time had passed, but the circumstantial evidence painted a clear picture. 3 years in prison, followed by probation and restitution. 3 years. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough for 30 years of my life. But I didn't need the legal system to give me justice. I'd already taken it. The real satisfaction came in smaller ways. The day Dennis's name appeared in the newspaper, attached to words like bigamist and fraud, the way his friends stopped calling, the way his comfortable retirement evaporated, the way I got to rebuild my life finally, on my own terms, Patricia and I became unlikely friends. I helped her navigate her MS care, connected her with better doctors, made sure she had the support she needed. She'd been another of Dennis's victims, and neither of us saw the point in punishing each other for his sins. "You saved my life," she told me once, over tea in her living room. "You saved mine," I replied. We saved each other. I took the money I'd carefully saved in a secret account. Dennis never knew about money from overtime shifts, carefully skimmed over the years because some part of me never fully trusted him, and bought a small condo near the beach. My name on the deed. My space. I retired from nursing on my own schedule, not when Dennis decided I'd outlived my usefulness. I traveled Italy, Greece, places I'd always wanted to see. I joined a book club. I took a pottery class and discovered I was terrible at it, which was delightful because I could be terrible at something without it being a judgment on my work. I dated a bit. Nothing serious, but it was novel to realize I could enjoy someone's company without the constant background hum of, is this real? The answer didn't matter as much anymore. I knew who I was now. I knew what I deserved. Joyce and I still meet at the diner after our shifts. Well, after her shifts now, I just come to keep her company. "You know, it's funny," I said one morning watching the sunrise through the diner window. Dennis spent 30 years planning for a comfortable retirement. And I'm the one who got it. Joyce raised her coffee cup. "To temporary women who turned out to be permanent." I'll drink to that. Dennis wrote me a letter from prison once. I burned it without reading it. Whatever he had to say, I didn't need to hear. I'd spent enough years listening to his version of reality. The thing about being erased is that you become very light, untethered, and once you're light enough, once you've stopped caring about the weight of what others think you should be, you can float away completely. You can build something new, something that actually belongs to you. I'm 65 now. I wake up in my condo and make coffee exactly the way I like it, strong, with real cream. I walk on the beach. I call my nieces and hear about their lives. I help Patricia with her medical appointments. I live fully in a reality that I've chosen, not one someone else constructed around me. Sometimes people ask me how I'm doing, and they expect me to say, I'm still angry, still hurt, still processing the betrayal. And sure, sometimes I am. 30 years doesn't disappear just because you've escaped it. But mostly, I'm good. Really genuinely good. Because here's what Dennis never understood about temporary things. They end. And when they end, something else begins. Something better, something real. You know that feeling when you finally put down something heavy you've been carrying for so long you forgot it was heavy at all? That moment when your shoulders drop and your spine straightens and you think, oh, this is what it feels like to stand up straight. That's where I am now. Standing up straight, looking ahead. Finally, blessedly, myself. If you've ever felt like a placeholder in your own life, like you were temporary in a space where you thought you belonged, I hope you find your way out. Not with rage, though rage has its place. Not with revenge, though that can be satisfying too. But with the simple, radical act of believing you deserve better. Of knowing that temporary is sometimes exactly what you need to be before you become permanent in a life that's actually worth living. I'm here. on my beach, in my condo, in my life. And I'm not going anywhere. Not for anyone. Not ever again. Come sit with me a while if you'd like. The coffee's always fresh, and the view is pretty good from here.